I worked the closing shift at a small print and copy shop, the kind tucked into a strip of dark storefronts that all go to bed at the same time. We closed at 8. It said 8 on the door, 8 on the window, 8 on the little hours sign by the register. On a slow weeknight, the last 20 minutes, it was usually just me, counting the drawer, killing the machines, waiting on the clock. At about 5 to 8, a man came in. Middle-aged, ordinary, a jacket too warm for the night. And the first thing he said before hello, before anything, "You're open till 11, right?" Light, certain, like he was confirming something we both already knew. I told him no. We closed at 8. We were closing now. And he smiled and shook his head, almost kind about it. "No, it's 11. I've been here at this time before." I pointed at the sign on the counter, the one facing him, the big black 8. He looked right at it, and he said, "That's not right, though," and went back to looking around the shop like the matter was settled. "I need a book," he said. "We don't sell books. We're a print shop." I told him that. "Then I need to print something," he said, drifting away from the counter, down the aisle of paper stock and toner boxes, away from me, away from the door. "Hang on, let me find it." And he started opening cabinets that had nothing to do with printing anything. Every time I said we were closed, he had a new reason to stay. He needed to make a call. Could he use the shop phone? "No," I said. "There's a payphone out front." He went and looked at it through the window, came back. He didn't make a call. He just needed to be deeper in the shop than the door. And every little errand walked him one more rack back into the building. I started doing the thing you do when you don't want to admit you're scared. I made a show of being busy and normal. "I really do have to lock up. The alarm sets automatically." A small lie. The alarm did not set automatically. But I wanted him to believe there was a clock running that wasn't me, a system, a third thing in the room, so it wasn't just my word against his that the night was over. He kept moving back, and I made a decision I've thought about 100 times. I went to the front and started shutting the lights off, the big banks, zone by zone, the way I did every night. I thought it would make him leave. A dark shop pushes people out. Instead, the front went dark, and the only lights still on were the ones in the back, where he was. I'd lit the way for him and turned off the way out. "Almost done," he called from somewhere in the racks. Cheerful, unhurried, and I realized I couldn't see him anymore. Aisles of shelving, head high, and his voice coming from a different spot than where I'd last placed him. He'd gone quiet on his feet without me noticing. In my own shop, the one I could have walked blind, I suddenly didn't know exactly where the only other person was. So I stopped pretending to count the drawer, and I just watched the gap at the end of the aisles. And I clocked the geometry of it, finally, all at once. The door was up front, by me. But to get to it from where I stood, I had a clear lane. To get to it from where he stood, in the back, he'd have to come up one of the aisles. And every one of those aisles came out between me and the door. And then he came up the aisle. Not fast, not at me. He came up the center aisle, the one that opened right at the counter, right at the door, and he stopped at the mouth of it, between me and the only way out, lit from behind by the last lights I'd left on for him. A shape with no face, holding a single sheet of blank paper he'd never printed anything on. "Found it," he said. I did not run, because running meant going toward him to reach the door. I picked up the shop phone instead, the real one, the desk one, and I didn't dial. I just held it to my ear and started talking. Loud, too loud for a real call, pitched to carry the whole length of the shop, the way you do when you need a room to hear you and have to pretend you don't. "Hey, yeah, I'm just finishing up. You outside?" "Okay, 2 minutes, I'm walking out now, stay there." To no one. to a dead line. And I watched his shape at the mouth of the aisle to see if the idea of someone waiting outside for me changed anything. It did. He tilted his head, the way you do when a plan you liked just got a variable in it. And from the dark of the back of the shop, a second voice said, "Everything okay up there?" My coworker. I'd forgotten he was even on. He'd been in the back room the whole time, on a break, headphones in. But I'd been half shouting a phone call across a dead silent shop, and even through the music, the wrongness of it reached him. He dragged one side off his ear to listen, and now he stepped out into the one lit aisle. Now there were two of us, and the man could see both. And the warmth came right back on, like a switch. "Oh, you're closing?" My mistake. I had the time wrong. The thing he had refused to believe for 15 minutes, he suddenly, easily believed. The second the math in the room changed from one of me to two of us. He set the blank sheet on a shelf. He walked up the center aisle, past us, polite, unhurried, and out the door we held open, into the dark strip of shut storefronts. And he did not look confused about the hours at all. My coworker thought it was funny. Weird guy, couldn't read a sign. I let him think that because the other version is hard to say out loud. He had the hours exactly right. He knew we closed at 8. That's why he came at 5 too, late enough that the strip was emptying, early enough to get in the door. The 11 was never a mistake about the time. It was a tool to make more of it. I think about how close it was, that my coworker was on that night, in the back, with his headphones in. Most closing shifts, it really was just me. If it had been one of those, the lights would have gone down with no one but the two of us to know it, and no third voice from the dark to even the count. He didn't break in. He didn't lie about wanting a print. He just refused, gently, to let the night end, because he never thought we closed at 11. He just needed me to be the only one who knew we closed at 8. I worked overnights in a big secured facility, the kind with gates inside of gates, a hum in the walls, and a long fixed route you walk to get from your post to the outside. You don't just leave. You go through checkpoints in order, and at one of them you hand over your keys before the last stretch. That handover is the rule. It's supposed to make you safer. Hold on to that because it's the whole story. The walkout went like this. Off my post, down a corridor, to the inner gate where I surrendered my keyring, then one last open stretch, through a work area with a couple of side rooms off it, to the outer gate in the parking lot. That last stretch after handing over the keys and before reaching the outer gate is the only part of the whole night where you are completely alone, with nothing in your hands, and out of shouting range of anyone who works there. On a normal night, that stretch is nothing. You're one of a stream of people leaving at shift change, 2 and 3 at a time, a guard within earshot. You're never really alone in it. But this was not a normal night. We were short-staffed, and I was first on the mandatory overtime list, so I got held back to cover until my relief finally came. By the time I was cleared to leave, everyone else from my shift was already gone. The stream had drained. It was just me walking out. I want to be clear about who was around because it matters. The facility wasn't empty. There were people in it who weren't allowed to just walk the halls. That work area I passed through had a room off it where a handful of them were supposed to be. A fixed number, accounted for, behind a door that was supposed to be shut. On my way out that night, I came around the corner and the door to that room was open, and there were more of them inside than were ever supposed to be in it at once. I clocked it in a second the way you clock anything wrong on a route you've walked 1,000 times. Too many. Door open, lights low, and not loose, not milling, arranged. One of them was near the far end of the corridor, not by the door at all, standing where he could see down the hall toward where a guard would come from. watching the approach, not watching me, watching for anyone else. A lookout has a job, and his job wasn't to look at me. And I'd already handed over my keys. On that job, the keyring is the heavy thing in your fist. It's what you'd swing, it's what you'd jam a door with. It's the closest thing to a weapon you carry. I didn't have it. I'd given it up 2 minutes earlier, exactly like the rule says. So I was in the one stretch with no keys, no people, no earshot. Another one was standing just inside the open doorway. And as I came level with it, he looked right at me and he smiled. And he lifted a hand and waved me in. Friendly, casual. Hey, come here a sec, come look at this. Like there was a thing in that room I'd want to see. Like the most natural thing in the world, at 1 a.m, alone, would be for me to step off my route and into a low-lit room full of more men than were supposed to be there. I didn't stop and I didn't speed up, because both of those are answers and I didn't want to give one. I kept my pace exactly even, eyes forward, like I hadn't heard, like I was the most boring, tired worker on earth with somewhere to be. Can't, sorry, gotta clock out, I said, light, to the air, not to him. And I kept my line down the dead center of the corridor, as far from that doorway as the walls would let me, every inch of floor between his hand and me that I could keep. And the man in the doorway moved, not back into the room, out. He came out of the doorway as I drew level, a half step into the corridor, turning with me, his arm coming up, not waving now, reaching, the way you reach for a sleeve, an elbow, a fistful of anything, to turn a person who's still walking into a person who's been stopped. His hand came into the light a foot from my arm. I felt the air of it, and in that exact second, the worst and the best second of my life folded into one, there was a sound down the far end of the hall, a gate, the heavy clank and roll of the outer gate working, and boots, a guard coming through on his round early from the one direction the lookout had been watching, and not soon enough to have warned them in time. And the room emptied of its plan in under a second. The lookout said something low, one word, a sound, not even a word. And the hand that was a foot from my arm pulled back like the air had turned to a stove. The man in the doorway stepped in. The door, the open door, the whole point of the open door, swung shut, quiet, fast. And by the time the guard's boots reached the corner, it was just a closed door and me walking past it, even paced toward the gate. I did not say a word to the guard. I gave him a nod, a tired, nothing wrong nod, the kind you hand out on 1,000 ordinary nights, and kept my feet moving, because my face was holding something my voice couldn't be trusted with. I was still inside, still on the route, still one closed door away from all of them. So I walked. I cleared the outer gate. I told them from the parking lot on the far side of the fence, with my car door already open. They counted the room. There were too many in it, and the door that should have been shut had been open. And yes, the man at the end of the hall had no reason to be standing where he was standing. Nothing I could point to by itself was an attack. A door, a wave, a man reaching. Each one alone is nothing. But I'd walked that route 1,000 times, and 1,000 times that door was shut, and that hall was full of leaving people. And the one night it wasn't, was the one night I was the only one left to walk it. I don't know if they knew it would be me, specifically, that night, or just that it would be whoever drew the short straw. I'm not sure it matters. The trap wasn't built around me. It was built around the gap, the keyless, peopleless, soundless minute that the rules and the staffing and the overtime list manufacture over and over for whoever's last. They didn't need to pick a victim. They just needed to wait in the place the system keeps producing one. I quit not long after. Not because of one open door. Because I finally understood that the safest part of my walkout, the keys surrendered, follow the rule, almost home part, was the part with the least between me and the worst thing in the building. They didn't catch me alone. They made sure I'd be alone, and then they waited in the one place I had to walk past. I worked the front desk in the lobby of an office building, evenings, alone. By 8, the offices upstairs had mostly gone home, the elevators sat still, and it was me, a wide marble lobby, and the glass doors to the dark street. My job was simple: sign people in, tell visitors who'd left and who was still up there, be the friendly face of the building after hours. I was very good at being friendly. That's what the desk is. It would not occur to me until later that a friendly lone worker is also a thing you can use. A little after 9, a man came in off the street, clean, calm, well-spoken. He came right up to the desk and leaned on it, easy, and asked for one of the executives by name, the man who ran the company on the top floors. He said they had business to settle. He said it pleasantly with a little smile, the way you'd say you had a lunch meeting, and he asked just as pleasantly whether the man was still up there tonight. I told him the executive had gone for the day, which was the standard answer whether it was true or not. You never tell a stranger at night who's still in the building. And his smile didn't move, but something behind it did. I think he's still here, he said gently. I think you can call up to him. I think you can tell him and old friends in the lobby. Soft, warm, every sentence a little more sure than the last that I was going to help him. And then he started being charming, really charming. He asked my name and used it. He made a joke about working late. He told me I had a kind face, that I seemed like someone who helped people, that he could tell I was good at my job. On any other night, I might have been flattered, but the whole time his eyes never warmed up with the rest of his face. The mouth was doing one thing, the eyes were doing arithmetic. I kept saying the executive was gone, and he kept being lovely about not believing me. He didn't raise his voice once. He didn't lean in hard. He stayed exactly as warm as a man flirting with a receptionist he liked, which is the thing I couldn't get my footing on because there was a panic button under the lip of my desk, and you do not press a panic button on a polite man paying you compliments. You'd feel insane. You'd feel rude. And he knew that. The charm was doing that. Just call up, he said again, sliding it in between the nice things. Tell me which floor. Tell me his office. I'll go right up. I won't be any trouble. And I realized what he was actually asking me for. Not to be hurt, not money. He wanted the name confirmed, the floor, the office number, the way up. He wanted me to hand him the man upstairs. I wasn't the target. I was the front desk. I was the key. I held the line. I said I genuinely couldn't reach anyone, that the offices were locked, that I didn't have a way to call up after hours. Lies, all of it, said with my best helpful smile. And for the first time the warmth thinned, not into anger, into patience. The patience of a man who has decided you're a problem with a known solution and is simply moving to the next step of solving it. He straightened up off the desk, and he came around the end of it. He came around to my side of the desk, into my space, behind the counter where visitors don't go. Still unhurried, still almost gentle. And as he came, his hand moved to his waistband, not pulling anything, just resting there, settling, a small motion that told me everything and showed me nothing. I never saw what was under his jacket. I have never been sure there was anything under his jacket, but his hand rested on his hip like it was sitting on the answer to any argument I might make. And he was still smiling. That was the unbearable part. A man comes behind your desk, sets his hand at his belt, and keeps smiling at you like you're on a nice first date. Because the smile and the hand were the same sentence. The hand said, "I can make you." The smile said, "But you'd rather I didn't have to, wouldn't you? And isn't it easier to just call him down?" Charm in the hand, the carrot in the thing he wouldn't show me, working as one tool. "Here's what's going to happen," he said, kind as ever. "I'm going to step outside, get some air. 5 minutes." He nodded at the dark street through the glass like it was a reasonable, friendly plan. "And when I come back in, one of two things. Either he's down here in the lobby with you, or you walk me up to his office. That's all. 5 minutes. You've got time." And that was the most frightening sentence anyone has ever said to me. And he said it like he was giving me a gift. It wasn't, "Do this or I hurt you." It was, "Do this to him and you and I never have a problem." He'd turned my safety into the price of another man's. 5 minutes to decide to betray the guy upstairs or to be the reason the polite man came back unhappy. He was leaving the room, so the trap would build itself in my head while he was gone. He walked back around the desk, toward the glass doors, easy, unhurried. And at the door, he turned and gave me a little smile and held up 5 fingers. 5. And he stepped out into the dark, and the door swung shut. And for the first time in 20 minutes, I was alone behind that desk. And the calm he'd left behind was its own kind of pressure. A clock with no numbers on it, ticking down to a man who would come back through that glass expecting his answer. And the second he was through the door, the second the charm was on the other side of the glass and couldn't watch my hands, I hit the button. The one under the lip of the desk I hadn't been able to press while he was being nice to me. With him gone, with no warm eyes on me, with no one to be rude to, it was suddenly the easiest thing in the world. That's what the 5 minutes were really for, on his end, to get the response moving before I found the nerve. But it works both ways. He gave me 5 minutes alone. I only needed 1. I'd love to tell you the response was instant and heroic. It wasn't. It was a silent alarm. No siren, nothing he'd hear out on the street. Just a signal somewhere that someone was on their way. And then I did the only other thing I could. I did not call upstairs. I did not warn the man he wanted, and I did not deliver him either. I just left the phone alone, so that whatever happened next, I was not the one who'd handed anybody over. He came back before security did. Of course he did. 5 minutes is 5 minutes. The glass door opened, and he stepped back into the lobby. And he looked at me, and he looked at the empty space beside me, where a man upstairs was supposed to be standing. And his face did the saddest, calmest thing. It understood. He knew just from my face that there was no executive coming down, and that the call he'd told me to make had not been made. And then there were figures moving in the lobby. Fast, the response I'd called. And he didn't argue, and he didn't reach for the hand at his waist thing he'd never shown me. He turned and went. Out through the glass, across the dark forecourt, over a low run of planters at the edge of the property in one motion, and into the street and gone, the way a man goes who has thought about leaving from the second he arrived. No panic in it, just a plan ending and another beginning. Afterward, they pulled the lobby footage, and that's where it got into my bones for good. The whole time he'd been charming me, the compliments, the kind face, the easy smile, his hand had never left the vicinity of his waistband. The entire warm conversation, the whole lovely chat, he'd been keeping one hand near whatever was or wasn't under that jacket, resting, ready, while the other half of him told me I had a nice smile. 2 things at once, the whole time, and I'd only been allowed to see one. I used to think the scariest people are the ones who shout. They're not. The scariest one I ever met asked for nothing he couldn't ask for with a smile, never showed me the thing that would have made me press the button, and almost got me to do the dangerous part for him with my own hands and my own voice, because he understood that you will not pull an alarm on a man who's being kind to you. He didn't need to scare me into helping him. He needed me to feel it would be impolite not to. I don't know who he really was, or what the man upstairs had done, or what would have happened in that office if I'd made the call. I never found out. That door stayed shut. But I know that the most dangerous part of my whole job was the part everyone thought was the safest, being the friendly voice that tells a stranger who's still in the building. Because the polite ones don't come back with 5 fingers up to ask you nicely twice. And let's never meet.
3. Closing shifts.
A man who refused to let the night end so he could drift into the dark of the shop. A hand reaching out of a doorway on the one leg of the walk where no one could hear. And the calmest man alive who only needed me to hand him someone else. All 3 in the same little window, after the customers, before the lock. So before you close the tab, ask yourself the quiet question. Of those 3, the one who wouldn't leave, the one in the doorway, the one with 5 fingers up, which would you least want to be alone with at lights out? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe so the next one reaches you before the doors do. And the next time it's just you in an empty building and one door left to lock, count the doors. Then count who's between you and them.